all know this. You probably got up this morning and said, I can't believe today is the day. Today is the 101st day of 2016.
Yeah, I know that.
Wow. You didn't know that? You didn't get up this morning and go, woo, 101! Woo. 101. It seems like just yesterday was New Year's, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Speaking of New Year's, how are those resolutions going? Are you still exercising? Are you spending less money like you said you would? I know some of you said you were going to volunteer more, so are you volunteering at church or your community events more? How about that diet? You knew it was coming, right? How about that diet? Every once in a while, I'll get on a diet, and boy, I got to tell you, diet is a four-letter word for me. I hate diets. I don't like the idea that a diet is all about not what to eat. You know, when you get to a diet, it's like you can't have ice cream, you can't have potato chips, you can't have cookies, you can't have sugar, you can't have processed meats, you shouldn't eat pizza, and all the nots go on and on and on. Not this, not that, not this, not that. I like to think of myself more of like as a lazy dieter. Just tell me what I can eat. You know, I don't really have the energy, the time, or the interest in counting points or grams or bringing out measuring cups every time I want to have a bowl of cereal. I'm just not into those kinds of things. I'm lazy. I said to my wife the other day, if I could just have a personal chef follow me around, make my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, hand me a snack, slap my hand at 8 o'clock when I go for some more munchies, that would be perfect. Life would be grand. I said to her, if that could happen to me, I'd probably look like George Clooney and Chris Hemsworth and maybe a little Paul Newman all rolled in together. But no, that hasn't happened to me, and so I said, this is what you got, dear. Diets are all about being deprived, and I like to think about, maybe if we could just have a diet that says, here's a list of all the food that you can eat in unlimited quantities. Speaking of diets are in the scripture too. Did you know that? There are diets in the Bible. The very first diet ever created we find in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis in chapter 1. It says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God continued to work very hard, and He created the sky, and He created dry land. He created vegetation, and then He separated the day and the night and gave us time. He then created the birds and the fish and the land animals. And finally, humankind. Chapter 2, the Lord God took man and put him into the Garden of Eden. He put him there to work it and to take care of it. And the Lord commanded him, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden. Any tree you want. As much as you can possibly consume. But you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Well, some of you know how this diet ends, don't you? In chapter 3, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took and ate. She also gave some to her husband who was there with her, and he ate it. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves in shame. Why? Why didn't they just concentrate on all the trees in the garden that they could eat from. They could eat from any tree that was there. You think of it, it was there, they could eat from it. But one. And they chose to focus on the one. Why? If they had stayed away from that one tree, things could be so different for us. I don't know about you, does that ever happen? In my house, we have a pantry where the doors swing open, where my wife keeps all of our food. And in my mind, I swear, when I open those doors, the lights come on. And this music comes out, you know, like, da-da! And there before me is food. Shelves of all sorts of beautiful food. There's vegetables, and there's fruit in cans, and there's healthy pastas and breads, and it's just filled. And right in the middle, dead center, eye level on the shelf, there's a backlit. You can't help, the spotlight just comes right into your face. And you can hear on the other side of this music that is playing, "Eat me." And there is my bag of potatoes. I can have the entire pantry if I want, and all I can see is my bag. Why? Why? Why do we focus on these things in our life? And there's that word again. Remember we did a little word slooping last Sunday? There's that word again. Things. Things in our life. Remember last week Paul said, be anxious for no things. Things. They keep getting us, don't they? Well, Paul writes in this letter this week, and he's continuing to tell us how to be brave in this world. He says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, stand firm in the Lord. That sounds pretty brave, doesn't it? Even as you're sitting there, arch your back up just a little bit and sit firm in the Lord. Be brave, says Paul. I don't know about you, but just simply standing sometimes in life is brave, isn't it? When the waves are crashing, you've been to the ocean. Have you ever stood in the ocean when the waves are coming at you? Just to stand there is to be brave. And he continues. He says, the peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds. Do you remember that from last week? The peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds. Paul says that's all you need to be brave. That's all you need. But I don't know about you. I've read that before, and I've read it again. I've been reading it all week, and yet I still have some of these thoughts that keep jumping back into my mind. It's like these thoughts that I know I shouldn't be having are attached to rubber bands. And every time I throw them away, they bounce back and hit me even harder. Every day, I spend time fighting thoughts. You ever had a day like that? You spend the whole day trying to wrestle with your own thoughts, thinking about things, and I read this and I wonder, is God weak? Am I weak? Paul continues in his letter and he says, finally, brothers and sisters, finally, he says, as if to warn us that here it comes. Here's the conclusion to all I've been teaching you in this section, and he says, finally, there are things that should occupy our minds. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, Paul says, think about these things. Paul says we need to get into a habit. We need to form a habit of focusing our thoughts on the things that God wants us to focus on. He says that focusing is all about crafting something in your brain. Crafting a mind that is courageous. Be courageous. Stand firm. You know, last week we talked about anxiousness, didn't we? Paul said, be anxious for no thing. Now he's saying there are some things that we need to be focused on. And this is why Paul warns us. He says an unfocused mind can lead to something that even anxiety can lead to, and that's called fear. And fear with an unfocused mind undermines our faith. Now, I don't want you to think that fear and faith have nothing to do with one another, or that they're polar opposites, because they're not. Because you see, fear and faith, they're actually cousins. They work hand in hand, fear and faith. They both gain power by using your focus. When you lose focus, when you are not following God's word, fear presents itself. And fear sneaks in to your thoughts in your mind. And there it grows. But Paul says, if you're able to focus, then you're able to not have fear, but to have faith. Focusing on the right things grows our faith. A lack of faith is a sign of a misguided focus. I still have what's called a digital camera. I don't know if any of you still have one of those. It's not attached to a phone. It doesn't play music. It's a camera. And when you go to take a picture, you look in the viewfinder, there's a square box that blinks. And as I'm looking through the viewfinder, if I put that square box right on something that I want to be focused, the camera automatically focuses on that image. Now, there's things in front of the image and there's things behind the image, and when you take a picture, some of those may be blurry. But what I point that box to is now focused. When I take the picture, I don't get the picture back with just the thing in the box. There's other things in the picture. There's things in the front, there's things in the back, there's things to the left, there's things to the right. Brothers and sisters, when we pray to God, we shouldn't be praying for faith. Jesus, give me faith. And we shouldn't be praying for Him to remove our fears. God, take away my fears that I'm having. Because all the time that we're praying to God to increase our faith or to remove our fears, God is simply waiting. He's waiting for us to improve our focus. Focus on the wrong things leads to fear. Focus on the things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable leads to a growth in our faith. And Paul knows there's going to be all sorts of things in your viewfinder as you're looking in life. There's all sorts of things out there that come your way. In fact, the U.S. researchers, they've been studying the human eye, and they've now discovered that the human brain can interpret images from your eyes in 13 milliseconds. Milliseconds. That means every day there are 6,646,153 images going into your brain. I know, some of you thought you were asleep. 6,646,153 images that your brain is interpreting. Every day. And that's just the images from your eyes. What about the thoughts and the images in our mind's eye that keep popping in? Thoughts You know, when Paul writes this letter to the Philippians, he's writing to a group of people who are suffering. They're in persecution. They're struggling from their faith. They're trying to figure out how does this faith thing work in this kind of a life that we have. And they're filled with questions, and yes, they're even filled with doubt. And Paul says, hold on. It's not as hard as you're making it. He says faith is actually quite simple. You know, in today's world, when we're raising children and we put them into sports, we tell them one thing. Keep your eye on the ball. Right? Keep your eye on the puck, keep your eye on the whatever, but keep your eye focused. Paul says faith is actually quite simple. Keep your eye focused. Focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. Put Jesus into your viewfinder. Put him in that little box and make sure he's focused. That's the view that Paul wants us to have. Because he says, you know, when you take your eyes off of Jesus, the waves are going to grow and they're going to start sloshing inside your boat. Your boat's going to start to fill. He says, just ask Peter when he was walking across the water, what happened when he took his eyes off of Jesus? He started sinking. He said, that's why we have to form a habit. Not just Sunday morning, not just an hour of Bible study, a habit. A habit that we foster inside of ourselves 24/7. Focus on the correct things so that you're ready when your life's image throws you a curveball. So that you can keep your eye focused. You know, Paul also wrote a letter to the church of Colossians, and he said this, set your heart on things above. He said, set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. Stay focused. You know, perhaps you're someone who came here this morning with thoughts or images that have just absolutely been tormenting you in your life. Maybe there's something that keeps replaying over and over in your brain and you just can't shake it. Perhaps there's something there that you think you don't have any control over. Paul has a question for you. And the question is, what is holding you back? What's holding you back from being what God has already called you to be? What's holding you back from accomplishing the dreams that He has for you? What's holding you back from changing the parts of you that you don't like? And by the way, He doesn't like them either. What's holding you back? And Paul already knows the answer because we're going to have a whole list of things, aren't we? I'll tell you what's holding me back. It's my boss. It's the neighbor. It's my spouse. It's my boyfriend. It's my girlfriend. It's my parents. It's some person in my life that's holding me back. No, it's the current, it's the storm. It's the floods. It's the fires. It's some event that has happened in my life that's holding me back. No, I don't have enough money. It's my finances. My finances are holding me back from being what God has dreamt me to be. No, it's my health. You don't understand, Paul. I don't have perfect health. That's what's holding me back. Paul, you don't understand. I have this recurring plague that happens in my brain. I have this addiction and I can't shake it. That's what's holding me back. Paul says, I'm sorry, but this is what you need to hear this morning. It is not the things that are holding you back. Because other people, in some cases, the person sitting right next to you has the same exact thing in their life. But in some way, and somehow, they're dealing with these things with courage, with bravery. They're doing it with faith, and they're doing it with victory, and they're doing it with an overcoming spirit. And you're just dealing with these things in fear and in weakness. Paul says it's not the things that make the difference. The thing does not matter. It's never the thing that's holding you back. It's not the thing that holds you back. It's how you think about those things that is holding you back. We all have things. You're not the only one with a thing. But Paul says it's how you think about the thing. If you think about correct things, so that when you start to go through some real stuff in your life, you will then have the same victory because you'll have the same courage and you'll treat it with the same bravery. Things are going to come at us all the time. 6 million a day. That's a lot. How many days have you been here? It's not the things that hold you back. It's not the people, it's not the events, it's not the finances, it's not the health, it's not the addictions. It's how you think about those things. Paul told the people in Colossae that there are things that are worthy of praise to God. He said, look up. Thinking on the correct things is what gives God the praise He deserves. Set your heart on things above where Christ is seated. Set your heart on those things that are true and noble and right and pure and lovely and admirable. So Paul, we want to be victors, don't we? We here at Good Shepherd, we want to accomplish this. We want to be brave in our world. And Paul says it's easy. Stand firm. Be courageous. Focus on the correct things. Now, Paul is not oblivious to the fact that life does throw us curveballs. He knows that. Fear, anxieties. We all have those things. And we will have more of them to come in our lives. But Paul says this when that happens. He wrote this in his second letter to the Corinthians. He says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Demolish. It's a pretty specific word, isn't it? It doesn't say we get by. He says we demolish these arguments. And then what do? We don't let it go. We take captive every thought and we make it obedient. Obedient to Christ. Now, I don't know, you may have been told this, or perhaps you even told your own kids or grandkids this one time. Perhaps you said to them when they had a bad thought, oh, let it go. Please don't start singing that Frozen song.
Yeah, sure.
But if someone said that to you or you said it to yourself, did you ever wonder, where does it go when I let it go? Is it like a lost sock in the dryer? Where does it go? If you're like me, I'll tell you where it goes. It's like when I play that paddle ball, you know, the little rubber ball and the wooden paddle, and there's a string between the two. And every time I try and let that ball go, what happens? It comes right back and hits me in the face, usually. Paul says, no. You don't let it go. You don't let it go. You're stronger than that. You're courageous. You're brave, says Paul. Grab hold of it and take it captive. Take it captive. And then look at it, analyze it, interrogate it, ask it, are you a correct thought or an image that I should be having? Are you true, noble, right, pure, lovely, or admirable? If you are, then focus on it. Claim it. But if you're holding on to something that's not, then give it notice. Give it notice that it no longer has control over you. You have control over it. I know you're probably saying, "Are you crazy? I've been dealing with this for how long?" This is what God said to Jacob in the Old Testament. He said, "Keep the book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night." That's when Paul says, "Stand firm." Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. It doesn't say meditate it so that you can recite it. It doesn't say meditate it so that you can teach it. It doesn't say meditate it so that you know where to look it up. It says meditate it so that you can do it. Do you remember last week when Jesus was in the boat? He got up and said some words, and what did he say? "Peace, be still." And then he turned to the disciples and he said, "Why did you say that? You can do this. You have the authority to take control. You can do this." And God said, "Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous," he told Jacob. "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Wherever you go. What kind of God is that? Well, here's what Paul says. He says the peace of God will be with you. He says if you focus on whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable, but then he changes his words up here. He started with the peace of God, and he ends with this: the God of peace will be with you. You don't have just God's peace. You have all God. There's no more authority than ever than God. And by the power of the Holy Spirit, He's in you. You have more than just the peace. You have all of God. You have authority to look at these thoughts and these images, and you have the authority to say, "Be still. Sit down. I have authority over you." You're not going to bounce out there and come back and hit me when I'm not looking. Paul says, you don't just have peace. You have God living inside of you. Stand firm. You're the most courageous person in the world. When you want to know who has your back, when you want to know who's got your six when you're facing this stuff, stand up, stand firm, and claim it. It's the God of peace who's got your back. Then you can just shout out, "I'm sorry, wrong thought, but you have no control over me. Sorry, that thing that I've been listing over and over, that's not holding me back. You no longer have hold over me. I have authority." It's not the thing that holds you back. It's how you think about those things. It's not the thing. It's how you think about those things. Our in-shape shepherd group, when they go running and bicycling, they have shirts. And on the front it says, "You can do it." You can do it. Because the God of peace lives inside.